Will democracy survive the next couple of years?
Access to Democracy is made possible by donations from the following organizations. Thomson Reuters, a global company with expertise and insight to unravel complex situations in the areas of law, tax, compliance, government, and media. Their worldwide network of journalists and editors keep customers up to speed on relevant global events. Thomson Reuters, The Answer Company. Crutchfield Dermatology, a full-service treatment center and Medi-Spa in Eagan. Their goal is to help you look good and feel great with beautiful skin. With service built around courtesy, dignity, and respect, Mayo-trained Dr. Charles Crutchfield personally treats each patient and is acknowledged as one of the nation's best physicians. Truestone Financial, with locations in Minnesota and Wisconsin, has proudly served its members since 1939. Truestone engages, educates, and supports its members to ensure they have the tools to empower their financial well-being. Truestone Financial, your neighborhood credit union. Learn more at truestone.org. Edina Eye Physicians and Surgeons, a division of Twin Cities Eye Consultants, has proudly served the Twin Cities for more than 55 years now, in 7 convenient locations. Using the most advanced technology combined with human touch, Edina Eye offers comprehensive services and dedicated specialists committed to excellence, with innovative procedures and expertise for the most advanced eye care.
Welcome. Access to Democracy returns. Alan Miller with you. And we have a private citizen who's interviewing for the first time as a private citizen. And this gentleman has been with us many times over our 23 years as the Dakota County Attorney, James Backstrom. And Jim, welcome. Newly retired James Backstrom.
Well, thank you, Alan. It's nice to be with you again.
Why don't you recount a little bit of your history from William Mitchell Law School until your retirement 2 months ago?
Sure. Going back even a little further, I grew up in Duluth, Minnesota, and went to Duluth East High School, had my 50th class reunion this fall. I then went to the University of Minnesota in Duluth, graduated there in 1974 after 3 years. Started at William Mitchell College of Law in St. Paul when I moved to the Twin Cities, and kind of by chance, I ended up living in Inver Grove Heights, where I still live to this day, and went to law school for 4 years. It was a night school at that time, and was fortunate and lucky enough to get a job as a law clerk in 1977 in June of that year in the Dakota County Attorney's office. The following year, about a year and a half later, after I graduated from law school, I was hired as an assistant county attorney by then County Attorney John Sonsting. And I worked in the civil division of the county attorney's office for 5 years. I then became the head of the civil division of the county attorney's office for 4.5 years, and was appointed by the county board to become the county attorney when my predecessor, Robert Carolyn, who had become the county attorney in 1979, after John Sonsting left. He's now a professor at William Mitchell, or now Mitchell Hamlin Law School. But then Robert Carolyn became a judge, and I was appointed by the county board to serve out his term in September of 1987. And I've been elected 8 times since then as the county attorney, or I was elected 8 times, and honored and privileged to have held this important position of public trust and responsibility for over 33 years, and just grateful for all the opportunities I've been given, and thankful and blessed by the staff that I had to work with.
It's interesting that in this day and age, I notice young people are switching jobs every 2 or 3 years. Obviously, you found something that you were very comfortable with and enjoyed, because here we are almost 34 years later, and you were still there right up to the end. Now, you were last here a year ago, almost a year ago, and we were just starting to feel the pandemic. the effects of the pandemic. How did it affect your office?
Well, it had a huge impact on our office, as it did on almost every business and organization in our state and in our nation. We basically were on hold in terms of the number of cases that could be processed for, I think, close to 4 or 5 months. There was no court activity allowed at all in Minnesota courts. So it didn't mean that crimes weren't occurring. It didn't mean that charges weren't being filed for those crimes. We continued to do our job. But I'll tell you, there's still a huge backlog of cases. It might take a year and a half to 2 years to catch up in terms of the number of cases that we've had on hold. And when I left the office at the end of February of this year, we had 9 pending murder cases, which is unheard of in Dakota County. You know, this is a relatively safe county, and we average between 3 to 5 homicides a year in Dakota County. But we had 9 cases that were awaiting trial still at that point in time, and I believe they're still waiting for trial, and there's been more since then. So it's a big deal. Plus, you know, in other areas of our office too, we had a lot of increased work in our civil division of our office related to the pandemic with legal advice. I think we opened up over 300 new files related to the pandemic and the CARES Act and the distribution of money by our county board to our community, to the businesses in our community during this pandemic, monies that flowed down from the federal government. We had a delay on child support enforcement activity. We had to put that on hold for a number of months. Our child protection activity, which you know, unfortunately, I think, and of concern, dropped dramatically in terms of the number of child protection petitions we had filed from the year before. It dropped over 40% in 2020, and that's alarming because
It doesn't mean those cases are going down. It just means that the pandemic changed the parameters.
Right, and I think one of the biggest factors of that is that the kids weren't in school. And when there's no teachers or the mandated reporters that might see the bruises or whatever on a child and report those things, those weren't getting reported anymore. So we're concerned, obviously, for the safety and welfare. I continue to be concerned, even as a private citizen, for the safety and welfare of our children and our vulnerable adults, and just praying for the best for all.
Now, with this backlog of criminal cases, and I know there is a tremendous backlog, as you mentioned, there's also a guarantee of a speedy trial. You got 9 murder cases backed up. How does that impact the speedy trial guarantee?
Well, you know, that if there is a speedy trial demand, those cases do go forward. In the cases that I mentioned, obviously, that had been waived by the defendants. But if there's a speedy trial, man, we continue to have some trials that occurred. There a number of them were recurring remotely for a while. There were in-court trials that were approved after several months that continued to occur. But if there is a speedy trial demand, you know, even to this day, there's not a lot of court trials occurring. There's more remote trial hearings taking place. But if there's a speedy trial demand, those cases will be heard and will be held, just like we watched with the Derek Chauvin case in Hennepin County over the last month. You know, those cases still occur. There's modifications to the courtrooms to allow the jury to be spread out with proper social distancing. They have to limit the number of members of the public and family members of the defendant or the victim, you know, as to how many can be in attendance because the size of the courtrooms. There's only 2 courtrooms in Dakota County that are large enough to do this in. So, and we have, I think, you know, 15 to 18 courtrooms down in Hastings, and most of them just can't be used right now.
So that is a real problem. Now, you mentioned the Chauvin case, the George Floyd case. What was your reaction to the verdict in that case?
Well, first of all, I was extremely pleased to see that the charges were filed as quickly as they were by Hennepin County Attorney Mike Freeman, and then the Attorney General Keith Ellison and his office stepped in to take the lead on the prosecution of the case. I thought they did. I watched a number of days of the trial, including all of the final arguments, which were quite long, over 6 hours. And I thought the prosecution really did a wonderful job. You know, the defense did their best, but I was very pleased with the outcome, very pleased to see a guilty verdict on all counts. This is just conduct that's unacceptable and terribly tragic in terms of the result, and completely avoidable. So yeah, I was very pleased with the outcome of that case.
And of course, the conduct and the allegations of police brutality unfortunately continue. And we've had several episodes, not only here in Brooklyn Center, but around the country in the week succeeding that verdict. So it's something that's ongoing and troubling, and we still have a long way to go in society.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. As I told my staff after the George Floyd murder in May of 2020, just how important it is that we never lose focus on the need to be fair and impartial and to all persons in the work that we do, and to keep in mind. But you know, it's a difficult time because, you know, police and law enforcement have a very difficult job to do, and they're under a lot of scrutiny, and understandably so. There was just speaking of the death cases, there was just a 30-year-old man who was shot and killed by the Burnsville Police Department just 2 weeks ago. That case is being reviewed by the Ramsey County Attorney. And the reason that is, by the way, you know, since the George Floyd incident, the county attorneys in the metropolitan area, the 5 big counties, you know, Hennepin, Ramsey, Dakota, Anoka, and Washington counties, the county attorneys got together and we agreed and signed an agreement. This was before I left office, that any case that involves an officer involved death would be handled by a county attorney in a different jurisdiction from where the offense occurred. And the reason for that is simply to make sure that the public doesn't have any perception that there's a conflict of interest, because, you know, every county attorney works with the law enforcement agencies in their community on an ongoing basis. And we wanted to avoid any perception of a conflict of interest. And we think it was the right decision to do. That agreement continues in effect until we're hoping that the legislature, quite frankly, transfers the jurisdiction of those types of cases to the Attorney General's office. You know, the office that handled the Derek Chauvin trial. I think it's important that there be, you know, a statewide consistency and uniformity to the handling of those extremely difficult cases. And I support that. The Minnesota County Attorneys Association passed a resolution while I was still on the board of directors to support the Attorney General taking over those cases, provided that the legislature gives the Attorney General enough resources to do the job in the right way. And they need more resources to do that.
Now, I have a question. It's probably the most important question that I will ask you in this interview. And that's what happens to the leading Elvis impersonator in the county now that the county attorney has retired?
Oh, it's funny you asked that. You know, I used to, when I went out and would sing, I did a lot of singing. And I used to say to folks that I was the only elected official in the state of Minnesota who was an Elvis impersonator. And for over 20 years, I went out and sang, volunteered my time to do that, and sang at assisted living homes and folks for seniors and some public events that I sang at over the years. And so now I guess, Alan, I'm going to have to just bill myself as the oldest Elvis impersonator in the state of Minnesota, because I just turned 68 and I don't think there's too many older than me.
68. I have shoes that are older than you. Now, one of the things I wanted to ask you, and you certainly had a lot of time in the office, what is your most memorable success during your years in the office?
You know, there's so many important cases that we've been involved in the county attorney's office, and you don't forget the cases that you've handled. I personally tried a number of cases over the years, but there was one with a little 4.5-year-old boy in Lakeville who was beaten to death by his mother's boyfriend and basically seriously injured. He could have been saved if they would have taken him to a hospital, but the punch to the stomach ruptured his internal organs. And then he left him, along with his mother, who came home later that night. She wasn't there when this occurred. She knew this little boy could hardly breathe, and they did nothing. They just left him there to die. And I tried that case and convicted Stephen McBride of first degree murder involving a sexual assault, because the boy, there was an assault that occurred as well. And that's called first degree murder. And he's serving life without any possibility of parole. His mother, by the way, was also prosecuted, rightfully so in my mind, and convicted of manslaughter for basically allowing her son to die when he could have been saved. You know, that one sticks with me. I mean, a lot of them stick with me. I lost a terrible case, which
I was going to ask you as to your biggest disappointment also.
Yeah, well, that's a clear one. That's on June 1st of 1992, a little girl by the name of Corinne Erstad disappeared from her home in Inver Grove Heights, not far from where I live. We believe she was abducted. We believe she was sexually assaulted, and we believe she was murdered later that night. We charged a former boyfriend who was at the home that afternoon with murder based upon lots of evidence that was found, including Corinne Erstad's bloody sundress in his storage locker that he had in a storage facility in West St. Paul. We found evidence in the home where he was living at the time of blood, which was traced back to Corinne Erstad. We ultimately found a plastic. Large plastic thing. I don't know what it was for, but we believe that's what she was murdered on, because we found a mixture of semen and blood, and through DNA analysis, that semen and blood was matched back to likely having come from the defendant, and the blood clearly having come from Corinne Erstad. And one of the issues was this was in 1992. And it was at a time when DNA use in the courtrooms was at an infancy, and you couldn't testify. You couldn't have witnesses testify to the strength of the evidence. They could say there was a match, but they couldn't really explain what that meant. And today, I mean, they could say that there's only one person out of 2 or 3 million, or in some cases, one person out of the world's population that could have left that semen mixture at the scene. But we couldn't use that, and we never found Corinne's body. So this was a murder trial without a body, and at that time in Minnesota, there'd never been a conviction of murder without a body. And unfortunately and tragically, after a 6-week trial and a 6.5-day deliberation by the jury, they found the defendant not guilty. I guess I respect juries. I respect the decision that was made, but I clearly was disappointed.
A hard one to swallow, yeah. If I had to take a guess, I would guess that defendant ended up in some kind of other trouble during his lifetime, and probably paid for that.
Strangely enough, there has not been anything that's come out from that defendant since that time. A couple of his brothers have gotten into trouble with the law, but nothing's happened, and maybe he was scared straight because he was awfully close to being convicted of murder in that trial. But that was a tough one. That one will stay with me till the day I die.
Well, DNA, which you mentioned, has come a long way since then. And how has that enhanced the ability not only of the prosecution, but of defendants as well in terms of establishing either guilt or innocence?
Well, it's helped tremendously. It's one of the strongest pieces of evidence that you can have in a criminal trial today. And as I said, the experts now, back at that time too, you had to have a fairly large quantity of blood or semen in order to get a DNA sample. Today, they can get it off of just minute. I mean, they could get it off of, if I touch my computer today and left a little bit of sweat with my fingerprint, they could get my DNA analysis off of that today with the technology that exists. So they're able, the experts, the Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension that does the investigations and has a unit that handles the collection of DNA evidence. And the Burnsville Police, by the way, has their own unit and collects the evidence and does a great job. But the BCA does most of that work throughout Minnesota. But they're able to get this off minute quantities. And yes, it's extremely important evidence. And it can make the difference between a conviction or not in a criminal case. And as you say, there's also been people that have been found that were previously convicted that ultimately were found to be innocent as a result of DNA analysis that occurred at a later point in time across this country. And listen, the last thing any prosecutor in America wants to do is convict an innocent person of a crime. And we're very careful in terms of the way we review evidence and make those charging decisions. But listen, mistakes can happen. Eyewitness testimony can be unreliable at times. People see different things, when they're under a lot of stress and in a state of panic. So listen, DNA evidence can be extremely helpful. But I'll tell you one thing. If you got just a minute, I'll tell you about one other quick case that happened in the city of Burnsville that we prosecuted, involving a woman who was, in her late 50s, I believe at the time, who was getting divorced from her husband. It was a rocky marriage. After 25, 30 years of marriage, she filed for divorce, and her husband had been somewhat abusive, at least verbally, significantly abusive. And she threw him out of the house and told him with court order that he couldn't be there. And he basically decided that he was going to kill this woman because he was extremely upset that she was going to take half of his pension and everything else, and was taking the house. And anyway, so the woman, came home from work after, around 5:30 p.m. one day, and picked up her mail, walked in the front door of the home. And as soon as she opened the door, there was a little foyer in the front hallway area. She was smashed in the head with this huge boat tiller. It was like a 4x4 piece of wood that was 5 feet tall. Smashed in the head, blood flew everywhere. Obviously, she was knocked to the floor, could have easily died right then and there. And had she died right then and there, I don't believe we could have convicted the person responsible, because if her husband's DNA was found in that home, it was meaningless because he used to live there. And there were no fingerprints found on this wood thing. You don't often leave fingerprints on wood, and we believe he was wearing gloves anyways. But anyways, ultimately, she didn't die. She managed to somehow get to her knees and fought for her life while she was being strangled to death. Ultimately, she was killed by strangulation. And during that time, she managed to scrape her killer's hand or arm. And with all the blood that was at this scene, that she was wearing white tennis shoes, and there were 3 or 4 drops of blood that had fallen on the top of her white tennis shoe. And the Burnsville Police Department gathered that evidence. They did a DNA analysis was done on that evidence, and it determined to be the blood of her defendant, or her husband, excuse me. And because he said he wasn't there and he didn't do it, he was in a park in Egan. And there was an eyewitness that saw someone else that did not match his description right around the scene, kind of, leaving that area at that time as they drove by. So listen, without that DNA evidence, we would not probably have even been able to charge him.
So much for justice, which works in strange ways sometimes.
Yes. So anyways, that case sticks with me too. And I'm grateful we were able to find justice for that poor woman and her family.
The county supervisors will be selecting your successor.
Yes.
I think they're down to 3 candidates. As a matter of fact, there was I don't know if you would call it a debate, but there was a presentation yesterday by the ACLU, among others, with the candidates. 2 out of the 3 were there. Do you have any preferences, or would you care not to get involved in that?
No, I've clearly made my recommendation known to the county commissioners. My chief deputy, Kathy Keena, I believe is clearly the most qualified candidate for the position. She's an amazing attorney. She's an amazing supervisor and leader. She has over 21 years of experience in our office, over 7 years experience as a manager, the head of the criminal division. She was my chief deputy for the last 2 years before I left. She was also, before she came to join our office, was an elected county attorney in the state of Minnesota in Lyon County, a smaller county out to the west, for 6 years. So she has an amazing amount of experience, extremely talented individual. And I truly believe this county needs to have that level of experience in this position at this time, because these are difficult times in criminal justice and in prosecution. And I am hopeful that our county board will select the first woman in our county's history to serve as the Dakota County Attorney.
She was not one of the 2 who appeared yesterday. I think it was Tom Pugh and Elizabeth Lohman, who were the 2 that were interviewed. Unfortunately, we didn't get a chance to see her yesterday. But that's an interesting, certainly, and should she be elected, I would certainly hope that you would, as a matter of fact, since you have so much available time now, you might come on and interview her, because we're looking for guest hosts for this show. And I can't think of anybody who would be a better host to interview the new incoming county attorney than the outgoing county attorney.
Well, you're kind.
Outgoing in many ways.
You're very kind. I'd be glad to do that. I'd be excited to do that in that case or any other situation that you'd like or need me as a guest host. So listen, I've really enjoyed being a part of your program over the years. I've been so blessed and so privileged and so honored to serve as the county attorney for over 33 years. I'm the longest serving county attorney in our county's history by a long shot. 14 years was the longest anyone prior to me had served. And there's only been up to me, that was 23.
Well, you almost got the record for the state. I think somebody had you by about 4 months, but
that's right. Yeah, my good friend Mike Young, the McLeod County attorney, has me beat by 4 to 5 months, and he's 4 to 5 years younger than me, so I was never going to catch him. But he's a great county attorney, and I wish him continued success.
Well, we've been talking with James Backstrom, and he was our forever county attorney, we thought. And he stepped down February 27th. We will find out who his successor is shortly when the county supervisors meet and make a selection. We already know his preference, and I think that probably should go a long way with them in terms of a determination. And we now have picked up a new guest host for the future, as well as an Elvis impersonator. I don't think we ever had a guest host who was an Elvis impersonator. So
maybe I'll come over once the pandemic is over. I'll come over in costume sometime and share a song with you.
You got it. And Jim Backstrom, thank you so much. And we wish you well, and we wish you good health as we go down the road to the future.
Well, thank you, Alan. The same to you and all of my friends in your program. God bless you. Take care. It's really been nice to be with you.